I'm going to ask you all to do me a favor. Go back in time to a place in your life that you were really afraid of something. Maybe it was someone that you were going to go see, maybe a boss or something, or maybe you had a doctor's appointment or dentist appointment. How many of you get afraid when you go to the doctor's appointment or dentist? Anybody? Yeah, sometimes it makes you afraid, doesn't it? But you remember the range of emotions that you were going through, how worked up you got. You had a difficult time sleeping maybe the night before. But then, do you remember also that once it was over, you had this big sigh of relief? And it's like, I can breathe again. In 2017, Anna and I went through a situation like that. We were going before the Board of Ministerial Development that was going to interview us for my ordination. And I can remember the days going up to that being times of really being nervous and spending a lot of time in prayer, asking God to bring a calmness to my nerves as we were about to hit that. And I say we went together because we're in ministry together. It's not just me. She's part of the ministry, my ministry as well. We're in this together. So things were going pretty well. We went over there. The night before, I didn't get any sleep. I didn't eat any breakfast in the morning, and it was an early morning interview. And I thought, okay, so I know that what they do is they normally ask the wife a couple questions in the beginning, and I'm thinking, yeah, go get her. But I didn't mean go get her, but I thought they're going to start off easy, and then they'll ask me, and that didn't happen. Right away, this pastor, now it's a room full of pastors. Now, intimidation factor like times 10, because these guys are really smart, and I'm not. And so we got there, and first thing I did was the chair that I was going to sit in, I looked to make sure there wasn't a trap door under there. So if I answered it wrong, they couldn't drop me down. But man, so this pastor comes right away, and he looks me dead in the eye, and he goes, "Who is Jesus?" And I'm like, oh man. First off, he gave me a heart attack the way he yelled it at me. But I thought, oh, how am I going to get through this? There's no way. This is the first question, and he's really direct on me right away. And then I just stopped and prayed. And the calmness that came into my heart and into my life that day was just amazing. It just seemed like all of that just melted away. And that's what God does, right? That's what he does. See, Satan wanted me to be flustered. He wanted me to make mistakes and give the wrong answers. He did not want me to be ordained. He did not want me to be here today. Amen. But God had other plans. Do you notice that just that one cry to God and it changed everything? And a lot of times I think we do that. We hit a trial or something in our life. Something's happening. And instead of crying out to God, we try to do it on our own. And that's not what we're supposed to do. This morning we're going to be talking a lot about fear. And we're going to go to a very well-known passage in Mark chapter 6 where it says Jesus walks on water. Now, if you go to the other gospel accounts, you will see that Jesus, their descriptions are different, because you remember that one of the disciples jumped out of the boat and was walking toward Jesus. Who was that? Peter. Very good. So I'm going to have questions all through this service, and we're going to see if you are ready and paying attention. So let me say what was happening before. No, let me just say this. I look at my notes and I'm like, yeah, let's just change things up a little bit. I'm going to ask you a question. Do you know Jesus? Okay, don't answer. Sorry. I didn't get it out there. Okay, let's try this again. Don't answer this question out loud. You ready? Do you know Jesus? Okay, nobody answered. Thank you. Okay, but before you answer that question, I want you to really take a look at your heart and your life to see what you have done to really get to know him in a deeper way, right? How do you respond to the trials and storms that you face in life? See, that's the true test if we really trust in Jesus, if we really know Jesus. Because we have seen what he has done in our life before, right? When we hit trials and things in our life, we know we can cry out to him, right? Have you ever had a time when you have cried out to God and he has not come to you and helped you? Not a single time does he do that. But, as you will find out, sometimes he allows us go into storms and deal with storms. Today we're going to talk a lot about fear, as I said. And we're going to see how we deal with fear. We're going to look at how the disciples dealt with fear in this story. But let me just set the scene for you. Jesus had just finished feeding the 5,000. Now, here's a test. How many fish did they have? Two. Thank you. How many loaves of bread? How many gallons of oil? No, that wasn't even a question. Nobody got thrown. Okay. How many baskets? I know they didn't cook anything, Dan. I'm sorry. How many baskets did they have left over of pieces? 12. Very good. So we're in the same, we're ready to go. But I want to look at this passage, this story of Jesus walks on water. I want to read this in its entirety, and then we're going to break it down and understand it. It says, immediately Jesus made his disciples get into a boat and go ahead of him to Bethsaida while he dismissed the crowd. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them, walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them, but when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. And they cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. Immediately, he spoke to them and said, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." Then he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down, and they were completely amazed. So there's so much we can learn from this little passage, 7 verses. The first thing that I want us to notice is, the disciples had been with Jesus. They had seen him performing miracles and healing people, casting out demons. And yet, through all of that, they still did not really understand who he was. They didn't get it. That's really clear in this story. But we're going to look at some lessons that we can learn from this passage. The first one is we need to be a people on our knees. Verse 46 says this. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. See, Jesus got away. Remember, he sent the disciples out across the lake to go to Bethsaida. And he told all the people, go ahead and go home. And what did he do? He spent time with his Father. And that's what we need to do, right? We need to not allow the busyness of this world to dictate our time, to swallow up our time, because we know that's Satan doing that. Satan wants us to be distracted. He wants us to not have real time to spend with our Father. He doesn't want us to listen for his voice. He doesn't want us reading his word. He wants us to follow along with the rest of the world and do what they want us to do. This is a perfect reminder how we need to prioritize our time in prayer, to spend real time praying all the time. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. How many of you have someone that you talk to every day on the phone? Some people are not going to admit it. So, Anna, did you put your hand up that time? Oh, okay. Because I know she does. But what happened if you didn't talk to that person for one day? What would happen?
You'd be lost without them.
You'd be kind of lost, right? Maybe one day. What about 2 days later? A little bit more distance, right? What if you spent consecutive days not talking to them? There'd be like a gap, wouldn't there? But isn't that exactly what happens when we don't spend time with God? We cause the gap. We cause the distance between us and him. It's not him. It's all us. And we need to make sure that we do spend time in prayer. Why is it important that I just added this. Why is it important that we spend time in prayer? Tell me. To stay close to him. To hear him, right? Because he tells us what he wants us to do through his word and through prayer. He's very clear on making himself known to us. Remember earlier when I was talking about the interview process that we went through, and that fear that came over me in the beginning, it was intensified when that guy came right at me with that question. But Satan he wanted me to do badly in that interview. He didn't want me to cry out to God, because he even knows that God will bring a calmness to our soul and replace our fear with peace. But I made it through the interview. Obviously, I'm here, right? Not because of anything I did, though, but all because of what God did. Praise God for that, because, man, I'll tell you what, if anyone would like to go through one of those interview process, let me know. I can set it up for you. But be prepared. They are going to come for you. Pastor Greg, you know that, don't you? Oh, they do. Whatever storm you may be going through today, you don't need to go through it alone. You need to cry out to God and say, will you help me through this? And he is faithful. He will. You know, this song just hit me. Through it all. You remember that song? Through it all. I've learned to trust in Jesus. I've learned to trust in God. Through it all, I've learned that I can depend upon his word. Right? That's the truth. We can depend upon our God. So what's another lesson that we learn? We learn from that we are never out of God's sight. Verses 47 and 48 says this. Later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake, and he was alone on land. He saw the disciples straining at the oars because the wind was against them. Have you ever set a goal, and you tried to accomplish this goal, but everything seemed to go against you? It's like that saying, 2 steps forward and 1 step back. It's kind of like the Washington Redskins. Steve, I'm sorry. You were laughing at the Cowboys thing when Donnie said it, so I had to add something in there. But as I was reading this passage, I was thinking about that storm that the disciples were in on that lake and how it had been holding them in that place. They were in that same place, holding. They weren't getting across the lake to Bethsaida. They were being held in that place for a very special reason. Because I don't think it was an accident they were put in that storm. The storm was placed there so to see how they would respond to that. Would they get all worried and keep on fighting it? Or would they cry out to God and say, help me, rescue me? Do you think, here's another question. I'm going to give you a lot of questions. Do you think that God allows us to go through storms? Absolutely he does, doesn't he? And why does he do that? Because he wants to see how we'll respond. To see if we will trust him enough to call on him and say, will you get me through this? Will you help me through this? Instead of us trying to do it on our own. And sometimes I think God will send us into a storm. That's what he did with the disciples, didn't he? Purposely sent them into the storm to test them, to test their faith. Sometimes he will lead us or tell us a certain direction to go or get involved in a certain ministry or to make a certain decision that he knows is going to lead us into the middle of a violent storm that we cannot handle on our own. And it's all about trusting him, right? Do we trust him with everything? But when he does send us into those storms, he has his eye on us through the whole thing. Something really really awesome stood out to me in these verses. And I want you to think about this. How many of you people live in the country? Okay, how many of you live in a place where there's no street lights? Okay, so imagine going outside, and there's no street lights, the moon is not shining bright, but it's darkness. You try to look down the road, and I'm like, what is going on? I can't see anything down the road. But that's what they were going through. And yet there was a storm besides. So it was dark out there in that lake. But yet, Jesus saw them. Did you get those words? Jesus saw them. What does that say to you? It says that he sees us in the storms that we're in, right? In the things that we are dealing with. Even in our darkest times, he sees us. And he's waiting to see how we will respond to those dark times in our lives. We get afraid from time to time. Anybody else get afraid? Because I get afraid once in a while. Like, wow. How about worried? See, there's a difference between worried and being afraid. Fear is all about what's happening now. Like, this could really happen. Something really bad might happen to me. But worry is more about this constant nagging, this feeling of unsettledness or anxiousness about something that could happen in the future. We don't know if it's going to, but it really could happen. And I don't know I'm not in control of what the outcome is going to be. I'll give you an example. Yesterday was that exact day for me. I was going to speak up at Chambers Camp for the Best Years Fellowship. And I was up at 4 o'clock and I had finalized the message and everything. I thought, this is so awesome. I am so prepared. That's when it hits, huh? When you think you're most prepared. But I had that message saved on my drive, and I brought it over here to my office to print it here, because the printer here is better than the one we have at home. And I went to print that, and it was gone. The message was gone completely. I'm like, oh no. I don't know anybody else here, but I'm computer illiterate sometimes, like, what in the world? But I have an IT person in my life. She's my wife. She can fix all those things. So I grabbed that thing. Steve, you saw me running out the door. And I ran over to the house and I said, Anna, you gotta help me. And she tried, and guess what? It was gone. That message was completely gone. Like, oh, and the clock is ticking. I planned on being up there at 9:30. It started at 10, and it was like 9:45 already, and that message was gone. So I hopped in the truck and I got up. I think I got up to where the airport road is that you take off to Chambers at like 8:50 or 9:53. I'm like, I'm going to be so late. And I punched it. That truck had wings yesterday. It was raining, but I was flying. I think I was soaring over everything. I made it there by 10 after. I was zooming. And you know what? The best part was God did something really amazing yesterday. That's what he does, right? Why was I worried about what was going to happen? I was worried about the mistakes I was going to make. I was worried about how I would make a mess of everything. And that was the problem. It was all about what I was thinking, what I was going to do, when it was all about him. And it went well. I was so happy, so pleased, so thankful. Like, oh my goodness, I don't know how you did it. Well, I know how you did it. You're just you. That's who he is. But as followers and believers of Jesus, what do we have to worry about? We don't have to worry about today or tomorrow or next week or next year, do we? Because our future is in his hands. We can trust him in all things. And I want to show you something else that I noticed in this verse. It said, shortly before dawn, he went out to them on the lake. Now, I want you to think about that. In the beginning of verse 47, it said later that night. So referring to the disciples out there in the storm. Later that night, they were out in the storm. But here it says shortly before dawn. So there's a time break in there, right? Get this. He did not immediately go out there to the disciples. He could have changed that. He could have just said, peace be still, while he was on land, and the storm would have been over. But he didn't do that. And he did not immediately go out to them in the storm they were facing. He waited. And he waited for a very special reason, because he wanted to see how they would respond left in that storm. Would they keep on trying to fight it, or would they cry out to him and say, will you come to my rescue? And I think he does that with us too. He lets us in these storms sometimes and says, what are you going to do? Are you going to try to do it on your own and fail? Or are you going to trust me to help you through these times? I don't know about you, but I get better results trusting him, don't you? He helps us in so many ways. He helps me, he bails me out a lot. Let's move on to the third message. The third lesson in this is we are never out of God's reach. 48 through 50 says these words. Shortly before dawn, he went out to them walking on the lake. He was about to pass by them. But when they saw him walking on the lake, they thought he was a ghost. Crazy. They cried out because they all saw him and were terrified. This is one of my favorite parts of this passage, because it talks about the rescue. It talks about what our God does for each one of us all the time, right? How he rescues us in our hard times, our difficult times. And here's what the disciples did not know. They didn't know Jesus was watching them the whole time. They had no clue. They thought they were out there on their own and they had to get their own self through that storm. They didn't know that he was already planning to come out there and help them, to bring a peace to their situation. So let me ask you a question. The disciples, did they ever cry out to God for help? In that passage we just read, they never once cried out to God. And they were left in that storm. But God changed everything, right? Jesus walked out on that water, and he came to the rescue. And that's what he does for us in our storms. When we're going through those dark valleys in our lives and dealing with some trouble, he comes to our rescue. I don't know why, but all of a sudden I got this vision of the SS Minnow that never got rescued. I bet they never cried out to God, did they? Or they'd have been rescued from the island. But we get so focused on that storm and trying to get through it on our own that we don't stop and say, the only person who can change all things, I can cry out to, and he will get me through this. I'd like to say the disciples had an excuse for not crying out to him, but they didn't. And I say the same thing for us. When we're in those dark times in our lives, those storms and trials, we have no excuse not to cry out to him, because we've seen how good he's been to us, how he's protected us and taken us through things in our past. We have no excuse. What about you? Have you seen God do amazing things in your life? We just need to remember that we are never out of God's reach. Now, let's not overlook one thing. Jesus was performing a miracle that day. He was walking on water. Anybody here ever walk on water? I don't mean frozen water. I'm talking walk on water. Somebody was just telling me that after the first service. They said, oh, I can walk on water. And I'm like, yeah, right. They were saying how they what is that? They're skiing, water skiing, how they're on their feet, right? I said, yeah, impress me. Stop and see what happens, right? They're not walking on anything. But notice what it said there. It says Jesus was about to pass by them. Did you get that? What does that even mean? Well, if we think back to the Old Testament, when Moses was up on Mount Sinai, we read these words in Exodus. Let me just read these. Donnie, the song that you sang just a few minutes ago that you were leading us in, I lost my thought. Wow. Satan, stop it! Show me your glory. Show me your glory. That's what Moses was saying to the Lord, right? He said, then Moses said, now show me your glory. And the Lord said, I will cause all my goodness to pass in front of you, and I will proclaim my name, the Lord, in your presence. I will have mercy on whom I have mercy, and I will have compassion on whom I will have compassion. But he said, you cannot see my face, for no one may see me and live. Then the Lord said, there's a place near me where you may stand on a rock. When my glory passes by, I will put you in a cleft in the rock and cover you with my hand until I have passed by. Then I will remove my hand and you will see my back, but my face must not be seen. Isn't that what he always does for us? He covers us with his hand, doesn't he? He protects us. Once again, on Mount Horeb, Elijah said these words in 1 Kings. The Lord said, go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Don't you want to see the Lord? Yes. We're going to get to. Is that exciting to you? Yes. I get blown away thinking about that stuff, but okay, let's go back. Go out and stand on the mountain in the presence of the Lord, for the Lord is about to pass by. Then a great and powerful wind tore the mountains apart and shattered the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. He's trying to do the sound effects for us. That's great. After the wind, there was an earthquake, but the Lord was not in the earthquake. After the earthquake came a fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. And after the fire came a gentle whisper. When Elijah heard it, he pulled his cloak up over his face and went out and stood at the mouth of the cave. Then a voice said to him, what are you doing here, Elijah? See, when God would pass by, he was revealing himself to them. And that's what Jesus was trying to do with the disciples out there. Do you think he would have passed on by? Don't you think he would have continued walking? He wanted to reveal that he was God to them. He wanted them to get that. But yet they still didn't recognize him. In fact, they even said, about a ghost, right? They thought he was a ghost, and I'm like, what is wrong with you guys? But back in those times, they were superstitious and believed that the spirits of the night brought disaster to people when they saw him. So when the disciples saw Jesus and thought he was a ghost, they assumed they were going to die, that storm was going to kill them. And after hours of yelling at each other in the storm, they were started to see this figure walking across the water. And I don't know about you, if I was out in a boat and I saw someone walking out there, I'd be like, what is going on? But how many times do we blame that difficult season we're going through on Satan when God allowed it to happen, even though he was watching the whole time, only to come to rescue us? Our human nature finds it difficult to see God when we are going through a crisis or trial or anything that causes us stress. We usually see the worst in the situation, not what God is doing, and sometimes we don't even recognize him. Remember this, no matter what you're going through, you are never out of God's reach. And the final lesson, we are never out of God's care. Mark 6:50 and 51 says these words. Immediately he spoke to them and said, "Take courage. It is I, don't be afraid." And he climbed into the boat with them, and the wind died down, and they were completely amazed. I get amazed at what God does sometimes, don't you? I get amazed at the things he makes happen. Yesterday was a perfect example. I would have made a total wreck of that if it wasn't for him speaking through me. And the three things that he said, Jesus said to those disciples, he said, take courage. In other words, be brave or be courageous. Here's what the disciples needed to hear that day, and this is what we need to hear too. Our courage doesn't come from what we can do. Our courage comes from what he can do. And he said, it is I. In other words, I am here. Jesus wanted them to know, and he wants us to know today, that he is able to be everything that we need in our times of trials. And he cares about what we're going through. And then finally he said, don't be afraid. And they needed to hear, and we need to hear today, that the storms that we are facing right now, he's saying, I won't let anything happen to you. Just trust me, right? So do we trust him? That's what it's all about. Remember, he climbed into that boat with them, and the storm disappeared. And that's what he can do for our lives too. As the worship team comes to close, let me remind us of these important things that we learned today. We are never out of God's sight. Do you know that? He sees everything. Now, some people think like some things are hidden from God. God can see all things. If you try to hide some things, it's not going to happen. He sees all things. He knows all things too, right? He knows our hearts. He knows if we are being real with him. We are never out of God's reach. He will never abandon us. We're never out of God's care. He's never stopped loving us. We just need to give our trials and fears and troubles to him. Let me ask you that same question one last time, and I'll stop talking. You don't need to answer this. Just to yourself. Do you know Jesus? Do you really know Jesus? Are you invested in really knowing who he is, spending time in his word and getting to know him in a deeper, richer way? If you do, then fantastic. Keep on serving him. Keep on doing what he's calling you to do. Actually, what he's commanding all of us to do too, right? To share Jesus in this world. Because Jesus is returning soon. Do you know that? Every single day that we live is a day closer to his return. And I want to see everyone go to heaven. If your answer to that question, do you know Jesus, is no, I would love to share Jesus with you today. I want to tell you how much he loves you and all he has gone through for you. Today you can have that peace and that calmness that only he can bring.